I painted this landscape a couple of days ago and I wanted to revisit it and talk about how I would break it up. If this was a photo reference or I wanted to paint a painting of somebody else's, how would I approach it and how could I break it down to easy steps? So, step one is really just to look at the painting. Step one is just to see from the back to front what we're dealing with. So in that respect, you got to look through the painting here and see what's going on from there to the viewer. So what that means is we've got the sky, we've got this going on, we've got this, and then we got this. So what we're talking about, what we're looking for, are planes across the ground towards you. So you've got this plane. You can't really see the mountain plane because you can imagine it'll do that, but it's hidden. So don't worry about too much about that. But you can see if you came forward, you would hit the mountain first, right? Then you'd hit the forest. Then you'd hit the hill. Then you'd hit this other forest. Then the other hill. Then this. And then you'd be left with this. So what we're looking for is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You don't want to go too far after like 5 or 6 because it gets a bit too complicated. So if it's getting a bit too complicated, just merge that into one and worry about this section. And then as you progress, you can worry more about the little sections. So once you get better, you can add more and more. Well, not better, more used to it. You can add more and more. But for early days, bracket things big. So bracket things really big. So I could bracket this into 3, and it might not look as accurate as you would want, but you're still gonna get a good representation with 3. Now really, it's actually more. It's that. But don't do that. Right? So let's start simple. Let me create a new layer. So what you want to do is go from back to front. We got the sky. That's fairly easy, right? That's just basically a blank thing, right? So next, you gotta see through things. You gotta see through things, and I visualize they're not there. Now I know that might sound kind of nuts, but I can see this painting in my head with nothing other than this. Sorry, no, that's a tick. So I visualize the entire painting with just the bit I need to worry about, which is that and that. So I can see in my head, and obviously I'm copying this painting, so we've got this. Forget the rest. Literally forget that these are there. Forget these are there. Forget what's coming next. If you can't paint this mountain well, it doesn't really matter what comes next. There's going to be a problem. So once you have that in your mind, paint that part. So I'm not going to do that right now. I've already painted this painting, and I can overlay some, little shots of me painting it. But once we have that, so let's draw that in. So we have that. When you replicate a painting or a photo, you don't need to be that accurate. So I've got these big red lines. But if it went like this, it wouldn't really matter. Or if it went like that, it wouldn't matter. What we're trying to get is the big shape. So don't get too concerned if they're not quite right. So we've got that. Sorry. We've got this. That's in. So by default, we're already on to the next major shape. Again, coming forward, this is the next major shape, this one. But you got to forget these things. These are little details that don't matter. You pretend they don't exist. So we've got to draw that. And we've got our next one. So we got this big yellow one as the next one. And then we got this other big yellow one. So you could probably put these two together. So like I said earlier, try and simplify these big shapes as best as possible, because the next step is going to make sense when we simplify. So The next one, again, we're going forward, 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 is this one. I mean, arguably you could do these big trees, but let's just do this one first. The order doesn't really matter when we're just trying to identify shapes. You could go from the front to the back, it doesn't really matter. As long as you realize that we've got, you know, these big shapes, then it's fine. So once you've got these, then, okay, these big shapes. So don't worry about these trees, like, you know, you have to nail them. All you really need is that big shape. But you're not going to do this all in one go, right? So let's clear this. What you're going to do is you're going to identify that one layer, layer 1, done. And then you're going to get into the next layer. Now you could put all those together too, done. But you got to remember that these go over the top. So as long as you put them over the top, it doesn't really matter which order you go. My pencil's whinging at 20%. You'd think I got plenty left, right? So once you have this layer in, and then you got this layer in, you got this layer in, you can put the trees on. Now, as long as you do this in the right order, it's going to work. Now, even if you get in the wrong order, you can fix that with the layer system. So let me show you exactly what layers I've got going on. So some of the times I have, you know, little effects layers, so don't worry too much about that. So let me turn them all off, and I can explain, you know, after I finished it, how I went and what I got to. And hopefully it'll make sense of the red lines I had earlier. Actually, let's undo that. Let's put the red layer back, and hopefully it will sort of line up. So we've got that. Again, ignore detail. I probably wouldn't do that because the yellows are exactly the same, basically. So what we're really looking for are this shape. So let's tidy that up a bit because we got the overlap, remember? So the mountain wouldn't, but you would start it with them going over, and then you'd get, because of the overlap, it would kind of sort itself out, if that makes sense. So we've got, do this too big, 2, 3, 1, 2, sorry, 3, this is still 3, this is probably still 3, we can go for 4, and 5 is kind of just leftovers, you know, it's not really a, you know, it's just a thing. You know, once you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is just going to be kind of there anyway. So let me turn all that off. I'll leave the sky because that's kind of pointless. So we have 1. Okay, nothing. We have 1, which is the sky. Now don't draw the sky just there. Draw the sky the entire thing, because it's the entire thing, right? So just make the whole, just pretend this is like the world and the sky. So don't just draw the sky at the top, draw it everywhere. Okay, so we go for the next layer, which is actually clouds, but I'll come back to this at the end, and we'll call this detail layer. So we got major shapes and detail layers. So we'll come back to that. So this is the mountain, and like I said, it goes across the lines. The reason you want to do that is because when we put number 4 on top, when we put number 3 on top, we might want to leave little holes, and then we want to see the mountain behind. If we didn't do that, we'd see the sky. But all that really means is when you're doing the mountain, just make it go further than what it needs to do. Right, I don't think I have these in the right order exactly, so we'll jump to that one. And so, kind of right, so it's number 3 and 3 and 3. I'm guessing, so this is not exact science, you know, it's not paint by numbers. Sometimes I want the different numbers in a different layer. So we can see it here, and that's number 3. So there we go. We got a lot more layers, but let me explain as we go. And then we got layer 5, which happens to be number 5, look. And then there. Okay, I've already rendered it all, but you can see the big shape. I mean, as you build this up, this wouldn't be completely rendered, but obviously I'm skipping to where the painting's basically done. So where is number 4? So we can see number 4, and there. and then we get to number 4. Look, and it's pretty much as exactly as the red one drew out. So what are the other layers? The layers are basically detail that really don't matter. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, another 6 layers, but do they really matter? Right, so you zoom out, you can see what's going on, and it's looking like it kind of should. So the other layers are completely optional. And so what I'm trying to say is, if you get the fundamental big shapes, the other little details are just so nice to have, which is still important, you know, and they're fun to do and they're nice to have, but they're not important. So let's start from the bottom. You know, you probably layer these if you had some, organizational skills, but I never do. So you can see it's 16. So I've obviously dragged that from somewhere. So it doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't really matter. So we have detail, clouds. This just adds a bit, right? What's 7? 7 is that little detail I said don't worry about. Layer 12, what's that? So layer 12 is basically just making them a little bit darker. So I'm going to merge them together because I don't need that anymore. So what is 14? I can't tell what 14 is actually. So just detail again. It says detail on the fields. So detail. Doesn't really matter, but it helps. So what's 11? More detail on the fields. So once you do this, you can merge them anyway. The only reason I didn't was just laziness and done or whatever. I didn't really need to. So 15 I think is quite clear. There's going to be detail on there because you can see the shape quite obviously. And there we go. That's just rendered detail on top. Is it necessary? Yes, because it looks flat otherwise. You need it. But it's not going to make or break your painting. What's going to make or break your painting is this. If you get this wrong, it doesn't matter how good you rendered it. If it's in the wrong place or wrong shape or whatever, you can get away with a certain amount. It's just like, is it in the right context of the entire painting? Oops, turn something off. So that's it. We can turn the red one back on and we can see, like, once you rendered each part, that's what happens. So let's do it one by one, and I'll leave the red off. So background is just white, don't worry about that. So sky, just make sure you take over the entire thing. There's like a little subtle gradient there. We skip to so this is the first part. You can see there's a little mistake there, but it doesn't matter. And then we skip to the field. And then you skip to the field in front. Then we put the trees in. Then we put the lake in. And then it's just about a few little details. We put the clouds in. We put the, last pine trees in. And we render the front. So I hope that's made some sense of how you break this down. So, to recap, what I'm doing here is I'm looking from back to front what these big shapes are. And what can I lose? So I imagine you could paint this. And you could leave the trees out, right? You could leave the trees out. You'd have to render the other bits, but you don't have to paint the trees. You don't have to paint this part either. So, what I'm saying is you get options when you break it down like that. I mean, obviously you have to compensate if you didn't do that, but it's about these big shapes. Get the big shapes right. And don't worry about the detail. The detail is the last most irrelevant thing you can imagine. But once you get the big details in, big shapes, sorry, it's going to start to make sense.